Welcome to our podcast. So this episode, we are going to be talking about rent and the opioid crisis in America. I'm here with
Joanna Philistine,
Chantel Smith,
Melissa Myers,
Riley Moscato,
and I'm Olivia West.
So Riley and I are both theater majors here at Dean College, and we recently put up the musical Rent, which has a lot of topics that relate to our class and the current opioid crisis at hand. It's one of the first and only musicals to tackle taboo topics such as gender identity, sexuality, poverty, classism, illicit drug use, and most notably HIV and AIDS. And the story follows the citizens of New York City and how they're impacted by these topics. The author wrote from the heart, Jonathan Larson, about what he was seeing in his own life as an artist in New York City. And though he himself didn't struggle with any of these things, he did see close friends and family members impacted by it. And with this influence, he wrote and produced a musical to send a message: no day but today. Many of the characters in Rent stand on their truth when it comes to their diseases and drug use, with the show even featuring a support group for these topics. For the main characters, Roger, Mimi, Angel, and Tom Collins battle their disease throughout the production, with Mimi and Roger having substance abuse issues. And the show also alludes to how each character contracts AIDS, with some of them contracting it through illicit drug use. And validating these characters' struggles without placing blame regarding addiction is something that Jonathan Larson does best. A lot of his hit songs like Seasons of Love, No Day Like Today, and I'll Cover You really send a strong message regarding these topics and are very hopeful songs. And the isolation that individuals throughout the show face is covered in depth throughout Larson's work. And today, theaters around the world perform Rent in honor of all those affected by HIV and AIDS and addiction. And now Dean College gets to say that we are one of those theaters. Today, Riley and I are here with a super special guest to talk about our recent production of Rent that we did here at Dean College and how it relates to the current opioid crisis in our community. And we are here with...
Hi, my name is Aiden Day. I am a sophomore musical theater major here at Dean College, and I had the honor of playing Tom Collins in our production of Rent.
Awesome. We really loved seeing Aiden perform in Rent, and so today we're going to ask him a few questions about his involvement in the show and what it was like to be a part of such a special performance. So Aiden, can you tell us a little bit about what Rent is about and how your character fits into that?
Yeah, so Rent is a musical about a group of friends who are also all artists living in New York City during the AIDS epidemic. It details the story of Mark and Roger, two roommates trying to make their way in the world. They're both struggling to pay rent for themselves and also their friends living in their apartment. Tom Collins, a former one of their roommates, comes back to town after working at MAT as a professor for a while, and he comes back to town, meets the lovely Angel, and their love story begins. Unfortunately, though, Angel does pass away from AIDS in the musical, and the show kind of centers around the group of friends trying to deal with this loss and also trying to find themselves in the world.
Very nice. And so obviously there's a heavy focus on AIDS in this production and how it affects the characters. But can you tell us a little bit about some of the drug use in the show, because we know there's quite a bit?
Yes, so Mimi Marquez is a struggling heroin addict. It plays a big part in her character throughout the show. It ends up leading to her death at the end of the production as well, along with her also having HIV. Her drug use also leads to her getting HIV. It's said that for the character, Mimi gets HIV through using needles that are shared without knowing where they are coming from. So drug use plays a big role in the show. There are many characters besides Mimi, ensemble characters who are also described as junkies and things like that throughout the show. And we also have the man who is supposed to be kind of the figure of a drug dealer within the production. So the show doesn't shy away from, showing how drugs also impacted the AIDS epidemic during the time.
Yeah, that was super impactful when I saw it as an audience member. I'm going to throw it to Riley. She has a few questions for you.
Could you just explain a little bit about how opioids related to the plot in the show?
I think that the opioid epidemic is kind of, it's the thing that happens right after. It's the thing that happens right after Rent kind of is established. There's a very big, through line between how we see the heroin epidemic kind of start and take over, and then how that leads to the opioid epidemic. Many people who were prescribed opioids then later on turn to harder drugs like heroin, just because of the kind of system we have set up. And I think for our production of Rent, it's very easy to see how these characters, characters like Mimi, who are kind of very young people, can get involved in things like harder drugs through, things like opioids and things like that.
Great. And what stance do you think that the show takes on drug use?
I think the show is trying to say that while drug use obviously isn't a positive, we should have sympathy for people struggling with addiction and things like that. And that our goal should not be to kind of ostracize them from society, but to, find them the help they need and, see what systems we're setting up that are causing those issues rather than attacking the people who are affected by them.
Yeah, great. And so I'm wondering, how does this drug use affect the characters' relationships in the show?
Specifically for Mimi and Roger, Roger is a recovering addict while Mimi is currently on drugs. And for them, it causes a lot of conflict within the relationship. I think if Mimi wasn't using drugs during the time of the show, Roger and Mimi, their story would have been much, much simpler. But because of that, they aren't able to, find an adequate connection in the beginning of the show. And it takes a lot longer for them to be able to relate to each other because of it.
Gotcha, okay.
And what do you think the central message is that the audience is supposed to be left with at the show?
I think Rent is a story about love and how it prevails all, and how, love is what can get you through things like addiction, but also things like disease and loss. Not just romantic love, but also the love of your friends and your family and your chosen family and the people you choose to surround yourself with. And I think conveying that message to the audience is one of my favorite parts about the show.
Totally, yeah. And so we know our own lovely Ali Angelone directed the show.
Yes, she did.
And so I'm wondering what it was like blocking out some of the more taboo topics like drug use in rehearsals.
Yeah, I think for us, Ali did a really good job of, not trying to sugarcoat any of those things. We didn't want to make the show too explicit. We wanted all audiences to be able to enjoy it. But I think we also, we took those things seriously. We weren't trying to hide the fact that Mimi was a drug user. We weren't trying to hide the fact that, sex and drugs and those things are a part of the show because they're a part of real life. And I think that Ali did a great job of, being able to present those things to the audience with integrity and with like class and grace, but also not, trying to hide them at all.
Yeah. Do you feel that there's like a certain demographic that you guys were hoping to reach with the show?
I think Rent is a show for, it's a show for younger audiences just because it involves young people. But I think also we're really trying to honor the people who were alive during the AIDS epidemic. And while those numbers dwindle every day, I think that, there's still a great group of people who understood what it meant to be alive during that time. And with us being able to bring the AIDS quilt, parts of the AIDS quilt to Dean College, I think, we were really trying to show that we understood that story and what that meant.
Yeah. So I know that you guys had someone on in the rehearsal process doing dramaturgy. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that affected the process and the final result?
Yeah, we had an amazing dramaturg. Her name is Ellen Radian. What her biggest impact on the show was really making sure that we as the characters and as the actors playing them understood all the things that were going on at that time. There's this big song in the show called La Vie Bohème, in which the characters are all kind of sticking it to Benny, who is kind of like he's kind of the main antagonist throughout the show. And throughout that, we see the characters kind of rambling off about different artists and places and things that, are meaningful to them. So Ella did a really good job of making us all understand all of those things. Throughout the song, we say things like to Uda, to Buddha, Paul Buna Ruda, and Ella did a great job of making sure that we knew who all those people were. And also past that, the show is adapted from a old opera. So Ella also did a great job of making sure that we understood where our characters were coming from in that sense as well. And also just, understanding the time period in general, and what was going on with the AIDS epidemic throughout that time.
Yeah.
Why do you think showcasing Rent is important to the Dean College community?
I think Dean is a very small, it's a smaller school, of course, but because we are a small school doesn't mean we are not representative of kind of what the world's demographic is. I think when we get into smaller communities, sometimes people forget that is simply just a microcosm for what the overall world is. And because of that, we have a lot of people here at this school who are, mostly white, who are mostly straight, and they sometimes don't understand the greater nuances of being a person of color or being a queer person and what that means in today's day and age, but also what that meant has meant in years prior. And I think Rent was really important because it kind of gave voice to that, and especially within our theater department, it gave voice to a lot of actors who commonly, you wouldn't be able to see them portray characters that are closely related to them. As a black queer person, I rarely get to play a character that is specifically that, and Collins allowed me to do that.
Yeah. And how do you feel like you were received by the community after everyone came and saw the show? Like, did anyone come up to you and comment on your performance or anything?
I mean, I had a great outpouring of people who were just so happy with the show. I have an amazing group of friends, but also people that were just from the town of Franklin, or teachers, or just people from the community that really appreciated the work and, really made me feel like loved and supported and, just really proud of myself after the show.
Yeah, that's awesome. So is there any kind of takeaway that you want to leave our podcast viewers with?
I would just like to say that if you haven't gotten the chance to see the musical Rent, not even just our production, but seeing it in any other theater or the movie version, please go out and watch it. It's really a great show. It's written by Jonathan Larson, who's just an amazing writer and composer who was just taken from us far too soon. So if you get the chance, please go see it. And, see what you can take away from it. It's a show, like I said, it's a show about love. So there's something there for everyone. And I think that's what I'll leave with you guys today.
Thank you so much, Aiden. We're so grateful that you came and talked to us about Rent.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, of course. And how it connects to our Drugs and Society class. And we're so grateful that you came.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
That was an amazing interview. Thank you guys so much for having a person from Rent come over and give us a little insight to how it was. So today we're going to be talking about the opioid epidemic in America, both past, present, and a hopeful future. So what is an opioid epidemic? So in an interview done by Harvard by Howard Koh, who was a professor of the practice of public health in 2022, He stated that it started in the mid-1990s when the powerful agent Oxycontin, promoted by Purdue Pharma and approved by the FDA, triggered the first wave of deaths linked to use of legal prescription opioids. This is people who were prescribed this drug and overdosed on it for whatever reason. There was then a second wave of deaths from the heroin market. So instead of just Oxycontin, it was more towards a liquid dose of it. And people decided to use synthetic opioids like fentanyl. And even just less than a gram of fentanyl can kill over 20 adult humans. So that was the past. And to understand the opioid overdose epidemic, the CDC states that the number of people who died from a drug overdose in 2021 was over 6 times the numbers in 1999. So it has increased more than 16% from 2020 to 2021, and over 75% of the 107,000 drug overdoses involved in opioid. That is a lot of opioids. It goes on and talks about the 3 different types of waves of overdose deaths, like Professor Coe did talk about in that Harvard interview. It says the first wave began in the 1990s, the second in 2010, and the third in 2013. So that is only a 3-year difference from going into an overdose death with heroin to then involving it with fentanyl for that synthetic opioid little kick. They also stated that 220 people died each day of an opioid overdose in 2021 in the United States. That is just an incredible number, and I feel like the media today is not really talking about it. So coming from the CDC, I feel like it is important that we kind of keep watching it just in case and kind of getting a better idea of why opioids are causing this ginormous overdose and this epidemic. All right, so I'm just going to go over to Chantel on current events. Chantel, what have you found?
All right, so far for current events, I found a lot of statistics. So basically from 2016 to 21, opioid overdose deaths, and these deaths were mainly caused, were primarily driven by fentanyl use, as we talked about before. They nearly doubled from 42,249 to 80,411. By 2021, these deaths accounted for 75% of all fatal drug overdoses, up from the 66% it was in 2016. So there's been a rise, and the rise has been not just in general, but also in like every ethnicity, but also in young people primarily. Young people are getting a grasp on these drugs, and it's very dangerous. There has been 3 medications that have been approved for OUD treatment. So
what does OUD mean?
What does OUD mean? OUD is is opioid use disorder. This is a disorder for people that overuse on opioids.
So you could describe OUD as a addiction of sorts, but
yes,
specifically towards
opioids.
Okay.
I haven't seen if it's specifically like towards like fentanyl, but fentanyl falls under the OUD.
Okay.
So OUD treatments have been found, and there are 3 medications that can be used. There's methadone, buprenorphine, big word, funny word, naltrexone.
Okay, and for those, are they able to be prescribed by any doctor, or are there specific doctors that are only able to prescribe those?
Well, buprenorphine can be prescribed and picked up from a pharmacy, is what I'm understanding, while methadone can only be dispensed through licensed opioid treatment programs.
So like an opioid center.
Yeah.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah, this is all important things.
If you ever know someone who...
Yes. These are important things for if you ever know somebody or you see somebody that's in trouble, these are important things to know. That even though that the crisis is rising each year, to get this information out there is very important. Also, as we were talking about the CDC has a lot to say on this as well, on how since in 2021, the overdoses were over 6 times the number in 1999. Over 75% of drug overdoses in 2021 involved an opioid. So the death rates are rising due to opioids, and this is alarming how nobody really knows about this.
Yeah, like I was saying, the media kind of doesn't highlight it, but it is rising, especially in younger kids. I mean, you think all of these, new rappers that are coming out, they talk about their drug use, and if a kid who listens to this, or anyone who listens to this, decides, oh, I'm going to be just like them, goes to a drug dealer, thinks they're getting a safe drug, God forbid it's just pure fentanyl, they're going to die without realizing what hit them.
Yeah, and you have to take into the risk of things that are laced with fentanyl.
Absolutely.
A lot of these deaths also are from people that didn't even know that they were taking fentanyl, because people didn't tell them that there was fentanyl inside the drug that they were using. So that's where you also need to be careful of. And that's where a lot of these young people deaths are coming from. You don't know it, and you're not aware of it, so you just succumb to this death.
Mm-hmm. All right. And is there anything else about the current events you wanted to talk about? I mean, I know we could probably go on for,
really
hours
could.
and hours about this.
Like, the final topic I'll say is the government is also working with healthcare systems to get more healthcare availability out there for opioid crisis. Mm-hmm. But as you know, the healthcare is something that it's a tug of war.
It could always improve.
It could always.
I did really want to quickly talk about something in Massachusetts for those who are suffering from drug addiction, specifically opioid addiction. There's a place called Aware Recovery Care in Massachusetts that has kind of innovated at-home health recovery. So this is a long-term solution for those suffering from drug addiction. So basically what they do is that they have a hybrid of both virtual and in-home care team visits. So they will give you 4 phases over the course of about a year, maybe 2, depending on what you need. And it's to help treat and protect through the risk of disease with transmissions, like you might get in a more traditional group settings. So a big issue with a group home is that if one person falls off the wagon and leaves their drugs out in the open, God forbid, and someone is, going through recovery, they're struggling, you don't want to accidentally go into a spiral and, relapse. That's not something that's very fun.
Inpatient treatment is very useful. It's very good. It's not the best, but out of inpatient, outpatient, and just doing it by yourself, inpatient is the best. I did a paper on it. And I actually know people that work in inpatient rehabs, and it really is the best for people because you don't have access, especially if you know that you're very weak-willed. It's best that you just stay there and try to get yourself clean while there. And they also offer you outside support as well.
Absolutely. And if you want to read Chantel's essay, it will be linked at the end of this podcast, just so you can learn a little bit more about it. All right, so now we go over to Joanna about
So I'll be talking over the National Associations of Attorneys General. they're basically a non-partisan organization who basically help with talking to other attorney generals in different states and U.S. territories, and one of which they basically explore the opioids investigations, litigations, and settlements. So I'll be going over the fact that according to National Associations of Attorney Generals, they established a settlement between the four biggest pharmaceuticals, one of which is Johnson & Johnson, that did sold opioid medications, which can be the leading factor to why a lot of people are dealing with the opioids crisis and why they've done overdoses and died from it. And because of their involvement in the opioid epidemic, they basically have to have this combined cost of $26 billion to pay off of what they did as a reparation for being the cause and the reason to why this is an ongoing situation that's been long going for back in for so long. And also after much negotiation within the diplomats of attorney generals who represent the states and the U.S. territories, they basically finally came to the conclusion with a coalition. The purpose of this agreement is to put an end to the opioid use disorder who suffer from it. There was a case that took place back in 2019 with basically some state that basically tried the court with confronting one of the pharmaceuticals who did have a way of contributing into the opioid crisis. And the verdict back from the court basically said something along the lines of we're going to have them pay back for what they did, and also basically take accountability. But after much review, they sent it back and looked back and was there was some math error right there and then. And of course that obviously is something that obviously sees as a thing to change and fix when you're looking into things, so they had to take another look. It also is distributing this money into different factors, like pouring the money into investigating the case even further with law enforcement and authoritative actions, taking legal action to bring attention to the detrimental ongoing issue with those who have the addiction, a drug misuse, and a dependency with the drug. The cause can include being prescribed for the injuries or pain thereof for athletes or people who do things that are athletic, and they're usually prescribed things that have opioids inside the medication. And because there's a risk factor that they could be addicted to it, because there's a withdrawal situation within taking that drug, it's very hard not to or stop taking it, which makes it even more worse and more problematic. The Association of Attorney Generals were included on 46 states, including the U.S. territories. That includes Massachusetts, New York, Colorado, New Jersey, and many more. Back to what I was saying about that trial. This was against Johnson & Johnson back in 2019. The court basically ordered pharmaceutical giant Johnson & Johnson to pay millions for its role in the state's opioid crisis. But of course, they ordered to revise the judgment because, there was a math error with the amount of money they had to pay. So they're still currently under appeal as of right now. There isn't much update to leading forward with that case, but that is what is said and mentioned inside the actual website. It also does help with finding more treatments, prevention and recovery programs, online document respiratory availability to the public, and tens of thousands of internal documents detailing McKenzie's work of the Purdue Pharma. McKenzie is the leading firm that is actually helping out with the whole entire situation. Is one of the largest consulting firms, and it's basically pouring their money into doing it too, with paying $15 million in order to reimburse costs and expenses, like I said before, the investigations and enforcement activities, and many more other things.
Yeah. So, along with what Joanna was saying, opioid treatment programs are available There is a number if you or anyone you know is suffering from addiction or just drug use and you want any help. Joanna, do you remember what that number was?
The amount of people that need help.
For the crisis hotline.
Yes, it's 1-800-675. I don't remember the rest.
Okay. All right. Well, you know, with a shot. So that crisis number.
1-800-662-4357.
So that is
help
that
is available whenever you need it.
Something.
Yes.
It's the
See something, say something.
that is the SAMHSA National Hotline. It's confidential, free. It's from public health agencies, and they will help you find treatment, use, and information, or if you just need someone to talk to. Another thing I want to say just real quick to wrap this up is that the opioid treatment programs, they provide medication-assisted treatment. So that is also testing that drug, which is super important because with things that are laced with fentanyl and with the fentanyl deaths rising in America, it is super important that those who are struggling and are trying to, you know, maybe they just want a place where they can safely take their drugs or they want to get them tested. You know, they might not be ready to go into recovery just yet, but, you know, they're actively aware that, you know, what they do is harmful and they want to maybe just get a better use of it. So these treatment programs provide clean needles. They have naloxone on hand. So if any overdose does happen, there is a safe place and you are in good hands. It is hard for OTPs to be qualified. They have to go through a whole list of trainings, FDA approval, and all of that. With the testing, they will show you exactly what is in the drug you brought in. If you would like to dispose of it, they have a way you can do that without being prosecuted or anything like that. This area is essentially a safe space for anyone struggling to use. You don't even have to be struggling. You can just walk in there, get a clean needle, you know, do your thing and get out. All right. Well, I think that concludes our opioid crisis debate topic. We did do a debate in class that had helped us to try to find more resources for this. I definitely recommend people to do their own research. It's a very interesting topic. And I mean, with what's going on in America today, I mean, might as well, you know, get some type of information on your own. Well, that is our podcast. It's been amazing. Thank you guys so much for listening.
You're welcome.
And I do hope that we have another episode coming out, but keep your eye on it.
Shout out to that video at the end, though.
Bye.
Fair warning.